Okay. Good morning. My name's John Nine. I'm one of the senior programmers here at the festival. And very happy to welcome you to both Cinema Café and the Art of Film Weekend. Art of Film Weekend is something we started last year. The idea is really to take these last 3 days of the festival and celebrate something that really relates to the art and craft of making films. These Cinema Café mornings, I think, are an opportunity for us to engage more with the filmmakers, filmmaking process, and we could not be more honored to have the pair that we have here. Actually, I should say one thing too. We are also celebrating this first Creative Producers Friday, and that's for us to acknowledge the work that creative producers do in putting together films, and hopefully that will be part of our conversation as well too. But yeah, just recognize all of the people who are creative collaborators in the process of making the films. Lastly, now getting back to the welcome. I don't think a recitation of credits is necessary here. You have a bio in front of you, and obviously D.A. Pennebaker and Chris Hegedus have done such incredible work over the years, and they're here this year with a film in the doc premiere section called Unlocking the Cage. I would like to introduce my dear colleague, Tabitha Jackson, who is the director of the documentary film program at Sundance Institute, and who is a pretty good moderator. But she's awesome. All right, thank you so much for coming, and enjoy.
Thank you very much, and thank you both for coming to do this, and thank you for coming to help us do this. I'm going to need some help because I am so starstruck that this moderation might go completely off the rails and turn into an immoderation and gushing, but I'm going to attempt not to. I mean, you've had such a profound effect on documentary and non-fiction film, both of you, from pioneering what I'm going to call observational cinema, because I didn't go to film school, and every time I use the word direct cinema or cinema verite or kino pravda, which I say all the time, I get told off for it having the wrong meaning. So observational cinema feels okay. Is that okay?
Anything you say,
just use them like...
We always call them movies, but that's because that's what we thought we were doing. But you know, in the early days of it, the word documentary was, you just didn't use it. It's like in Florida, you don't say, you know, whatever it is about the change in our climate change. I don't think they're allowed to say that publicly in Miami.
Right.
But the word documentary, the minute a person running a theater heard it, you were closed out.
It's you know, it hasn't changed that much in that when I was involved with a couple of films just before I came to Sundance, the marketing would not let us use the word documentary, the marketing. It had to be a thriller. You couldn't say documentary because they perceived that it closed that down. I think things are changing now, though.
We always called it the D word, and you know.
Okay, well, we're opening this panel, so let's start with the opening of a film and take it from there. Let's have clip number 1.
Something you did, God knows when, but it right there.
When? Today?
Oh, it's in back the door.
He's got it.
It's in back this door here. Will you remember?
Great. So I wanted to show the whole opening up until he goes up on stage, partly because that very opening with the cards is so familiar, even for people who haven't seen it.
Yeah.
It's part of the culture. And I'm sure that lots of people don't realise that that's an opening to a film rather than a pop video. And so that opening, then into him as a character and onto stage, can you talk a little bit about the thinking behind it and how you both think about openings for films?
Well, first of all, not much thinking goes behind much that happens in these films. They're not thinking films. They're films that you took along the way, and then later you figured out how to put them together. But the beginning, the original beginning that I thought was going to be the beginning, is where it stopped, the stuff in the alley, and he comes on and says, "You start out standing." And I thought, that's a good beginning, start out standing. And but we had done the thing in the alley for nobody knew why. We just did it. And we tried to do one out in the garden behind the hotel, and the police came and stopped us. So when I stopped fighting with the cop to keep my camera, we decided to go to the alley where nobody would starve us. And we later did one on the roof when everybody dressed up better, but wind came and blew most of the cards over London. So that was the history of that particular shot.
But I love the fact that you go to this alley and Allen Ginsberg just happens to be in the
Alan
background.
was with us all the time. Well, Alan was sort of an old friend. I'd known him since the Village, but he, nothing was very much planned. But these are not planned theater pieces. There's no yellow pad involved. And
Wasn't that like the show Ready, Steady, Go, which was like a very early MTV show that took a song and did some kind of really ridiculous, goofy things?
Yeah, well, they did some stuff with the Beatles. The Beatles, they weren't allowed to actually play their music on the radio or on TV, I guess it was. It was radio. Well, I don't remember whether it was TV then. And so they would get up and do goofy things, and pretend they were playing. But whether this was meant to be that, or whether Albert's whole reason for having me make this film was never clearly stated. I mean, I never knew. I think in the beginning, I assumed that he wanted a kind of some sort of promotional film to help Bob do his concerts, because this was the first concert really in England. And I was kind of, I was ready to do that. I had never done such a film before, actually, working with Drew at the Time Life stuff. But the more I saw of Dylan, the less I wanted to do a musical film, and the more I kind of was interested in just the things he said and how he said them. So I kind of imagined in my head I was making a film of Byron.
A film of Byron?
Well, because I had read, this is probably more than anybody wants to hear, right?
No, we want to hear it.
Well, I had read, there was a wonderful English book of all of Byron's letters to and from him. And I had read this, and I got really intrigued because he was very young. I mean, he died at 31 or 32. But I kind of knew, and then he ran off with Shelley, and they went to Switzerland, and then they went and ended in Italy. And they ended up in this huge kind of house that they got hold of. And all of the English kind of intellectuals, Trelawney and whatnot, all came down because that's where they wanted to hang out. It was sort of like San Francisco had gotten to be. And I thought, if I'd been there and had a camera and made a film of what was going on, it wouldn't have mattered whether it was a very good film or a bad. People would still be looking at it. Mm-hmm. So I had that sense with Bob that beyond my, range, that years from now, people would be wanting to know what he was like and how he started.
And this speaks to some of the things I hope we're going to touch on this morning, both capturing this stuff, this chronicling of American culture, but also preserving it and archiving it so that we can now look at it now, and you've captured a moment in time. But I want to come back to the although as you film it, it's happening spontaneously and you just do it.
Yeah.
When you edit it, that's very intentional. You put that there in front of him. Talk about introducing characters.
Originally, my editing equipment was very limited. I had a viewer that you buy for about $50 you could buy at a film store, and it had a very hot bulb in it, but you could pull film through it, and a little screen, you could look at it. And then I had a synchronizer, which had rolling heads that had little holes that caught in the sprocket holes, and you could draw sound if you had the sound transferred, the sound through that, and you put the two of them together, and you kind of had a sound picture way of looking, but it was very rough. I mean, the music didn't sound quite the way it did when you put it on a machine, but you could move fast. You could see what you'd done, and you could go back and cut in things. So it was a good way, and you never took it out of that. If you wanted to see something, you cut it here, and then you had a rewind, and you pulled it, and it went through, and you saw what it was, and if it didn't like it, you could take it out. The film, I have to tell you, I edited it in about 3 weeks. And I think...
You edited Don't Look Back in 3 weeks?
Yes, because I put it together the way I shot it. It didn't occur to me to make any more theatrical aspect of it. I just put it... The only thing is, I had a shot that... what was his name? Ed Emschuller. See,
That's what I'm here for.
when the two of us sitting here yelling at each other, where the concept is, the louder you yell, the more apt you are to remember it. But Ed Emschuller had been down in Mississippi, I think it was, and he'd been shooting some stuff, and suddenly Dylan had appeared singing, as he does, and he couldn't use it. Why? Whether it was he thought he wouldn't get permission, or whether it wasn't part of the film he was doing, he sent it over to me to look at, and I never looked at it because I thought I kind of have a lot of film now already, and I don't need any more. So I put it on the shelf over this little rig that I had set up. And when I came to the moment when the guy said, "How did it all begin for you?" I thought, shit, I don't know. How did it begin for you? I don't know with this guy. He's kind of a street kid, and I kind of was intrigued by him. So I pulled the thing down, and I cut it into the film, and I pulled it through, and I never took a frame out. So it was one of those things you figure God is watching over you and helping you when you give him a chance. And that's kind of the way it happened.
One of the things that I always think about when I see a film like Don't Look Back and Penny and the group of filmmakers that he began with that engineered a lot of the first handheld equipment is that it also came at a time when the zoom lens was just getting popular and being used. And, it's almost like the editing in some ways in Don't Look Back, and some of those films are done with the zoom lens, because you kind of are panning around the room, then you're zooming in, and, rather than cutting to close-ups and stuff, a lot of it is just happening organically with the camera. And that was really novel, I think, in that film as well.
Let's just take a moment on technology, because for those people who don't know, I think it's fair to say that you, along with some of your colleagues at the time, Leacock and Drew, and also there's a movement in France, Al Maisels, dearly departed Al Maisels, were actually responsible for changing what documentary could be and could feel like. And people have talked about that time, 1960-ish, as the time when documentary did turn into this empathy machine, that the camera that you created was an empathy machine because you weren't observing from a distance, because of being able to record sound and image at the same time and get off the tripod. You could be in people's lives rather than simply documenting them.
A lot was changing, and I'd never been to film school or anything, so I didn't know anything about how you were supposed to edit film or mix it or anything. And so everything I did was like the first film I made, which was a little short film about the elevated with Daybreak Express. I put it together with adhesive tape where I cut them off of Band-Aids. So you can see it was very crude. And I used original. I didn't even know how to make a work print of it. So, I mean, it was ridiculous. But it kind of didn't matter because I was only showing them to my friends. I mean, there was no distribution involved ever in any of this. And it was that way with this film in a way. I kind of put it together, and in the end, I found the ending was the real ending, which seemed to be, I didn't even put my name on the credit at the end. In fact, I wasn't even going to put a title on it, and Albert said, you better put a title on it, because nobody will know what it's called. But it was kind of, in those days, it didn't matter because there was nobody waiting to look at it. And I would take it, there was 3 distributors who were known distributors of films, movies, and they were, of course, contact with the theaters that ran them in New York State, and I was told to go see them, and I took the film, which was then in 2 big reels, which I had to carry, and we would be in a little booth somewhere, and I'd put on the first reel, and at the end of the first reel, they were gone. They didn't even look at the second reel. And I would say, well, can you take this to just maybe one theater and try it? They said, no, it's too ratty looking. It's not the kind of film that the theaters want to show. It doesn't show celebrities, you know, and that they know. It was not the kind of theater film that everybody was expecting. So we just, I don't know, we made maybe 3 films which we had to distribute ourselves because there was no welcome distributing. And in fact, the story, which I'm sure most of you maybe have heard, but I got a call one day from somebody who I didn't know who said, I'm told that you have a film I should look at. So I was ready to show it to anybody. And he came in and looked at it. In the end, he said, you know, it's exactly the kind of film I'm looking for. It looks like a porn film, but it's not. And it turned out he had this huge span of porn theaters all over the West, and he said, I'm going to give you the best theater I have, which is in San Francisco. It was what was it? The Presidio. The Presidio. The sound of you think of ornate Italian structures with, you know, huge columns. It was actually a ratty little theater, but it played there for a year. The 16 print that we had played. Every night I would have to pray that 16 print would hold up for one more screening.
But that's ironic because I'm not ironic. It fits into this notion that actually pornography has driven lots of the technological advances and pushed it through, and it's also then responsible for documentary as we know it.
I don't know it might still be going unnoticed. It hasn't been for the guy. I was very grateful to him.
It's well, I mean, I think, you know, the other thing that talking about the intimacy that comes with this different kind of technology must affect the way that you both interact with your subjects or the people that you're filming, that you can have a different relationship with them. So I was just interested in the kind of relationship, how you view the people you are filming, and is it a collaboration? Is it an objective distance? How do you see it?
Well, I figure most of the people that I film work it out for themselves. I never have a coaching talk or anything, and I never interview them. I never asked Bob Dylan why he changed his name. It seemed to me it was not the kind of question you'd ask if you were having dinner with him. You know, you kind of form an alliance, but you have this thing on your shoulder that clearly it's like, you know, you have some kind of medical deformation, and people don't look at it after a while because it doesn't interest them that much. They don't know what you're doing, and they know what they're doing, and that matters to them. So they kind of don't take time out of that to worry about whether you're making the right film or doing the right things. And pretty soon, you're part of the family.
Chris, I read somewhere you said, it's just a line, you said, they just have to trust us.
Yeah, I mean, we really think of it as being their film too. And, you know, most of the films we make are films where people are very passionate. They've spent their life doing something and they're about to take some type of risk. And, you know, we ask them if we could kind of go along on their journey. And, you know, it's difficult because sometimes the journey doesn't turn out the way they expected and they don't turn out to, you know, be the, you know, amazing whatever it is they were trying to do. And that's always a very hard moment. But, you know, that's what these films are about too. They're, you know, people are human. And I think that's what makes the film, you know, very sympathetic and something that people can really understand the humanity of people.
This is a perfect place to stop. Let's have clip 2. We should just set it up. This is from a film called Jane, and a young actress called Jane. You've been following her as she prepares for her Broadway debut.
Say who her father was, too, because maybe he's forgotten now.
Her father, Jane's father, was a famous actor called Henry Fonda. And
I just want to be sure you all
this is
are up to date here.
I think this is a wonderful, it's almost like a hidden gem, but this exemplifies the trust that she must have had in you, that after she's made her great Broadway debut, and in those days of waiting for the press to come out, and these reviewers who could finish you or make you, she reads the review in front of Penny. So let's have a look at that.
But remember, she got into this whole thing because she wanted to show her father, the big actor, what a good actress she could be. And here's the result.
Are they going already? Madeline and... Oh, sweet. Oh, you got the first thing. He didn't get the response of the bikini because I think that everybody knew about it.
Yes, I have one there, but it also seems all taken. Come on, I'll show you.
Your table?
Our table taken. You know the
This is Walter Kerr. I find it impossible to believe that the fun couple ever went out of town. If it had gone out of town, they'd have closed it. Nor do I believe one single thing I saw at the Lyceum last night. Surely Jane Fonda and Bradford Dillman, who have small reputations to consider, weren't sitting there in that Tijuana bed, she in the upper part of his pajamas, he in the lower part, half fighting shy of each other and half wanting to paw a bit as they contemplated their first honeymoon night together. Her hair up to now had been... I don't know why I'm laughing. Her hair up to now had been sufficient for her to play the role of Lady Godiva, if need be, and need was. The only thing it proves, I'm afraid, is that girls' hips are not always what you want them to be, that an actress's feet get dirty if she doesn't wear shoes for a whole act, and that no matter what the circumstances, professional performers do not die of embarrassment on the stage. I'm going to wash my hair and forget the whole thing, says Mr. Dillman, saving dialogue a little later on. And now I'm going to wash my hair, but I shall never, never forget. Wow, 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 wow. Boy, that is depressing. Oh, God, it really is like needles.
Closed the next day.
Closed the next day. It's just such a brutal, it's such a an exposing moment for her as well. Chris, what did you, when you first saw this
I said,
film?
do you want a copy of it? I can get one. She said, no, I'm going to lock myself in the bathroom. Oh, she's great. She, I loved her. I've loved her ever since, because that was such a gutsy thing that and it wasn't just because of her father or not. It had to do with her feeling of her own personal stake. And she'd made it, and the guy she was living with, they separated almost that night. And her life changed a lot. She became a kind of a different person, but she was always a kind of a marvelous person.
Yeah. Would it have been a better film if she'd had a good review or a bad review?
Those questions don't bother documentary filmmakers. That's not their problem.
Great. Chris, well said. Chris, when you first saw this film, what did it make you think?
Well, I saw this film in New York in a very small early version of Film Forum Theater, which was an independent cinema, one of the first in New York at the time. And it was like, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. I had gone to art school. I didn't even know women could make films at that time. There were really no women directors in Hollywood that I'd ever heard of. Not that there are that many now. Hopefully there'll be more. So I became, I went to art school and eventually started making experimental art films. And slowly I started seeing documentaries and kind of changed my path and started working in that way. But when I saw this film, Jane, it was so much like a fiction film for me, because we'd grown up on all those, Let's Put on a Play, Andy Rooney, whatever films. And, it also seemed like something that you could shoot yourself. So I immediately went and found Pennebaker and asked if I could be part of his company. At that point, he was going bankrupt, so he didn't really have any company.
It was complicated.
But it formed the beginning of our partnership, and I always, think of that when I see this film. And, for me, it's one of my favorite films. And we tried for years to do another, film about a Broadway play or a play. And we did a couple interesting ones very differently. I mean, one of them was Samuel Beckett actually wrote a play that we could make a film about. And, we were just like so excited, like the great Samuel Beckett has written a play for us. And then we got the play in the mail and we read it. And the play was a woman sitting in a rocking chair, dying, and she doesn't say anything. It's just kind of a voiceover monologue. So we kind of felt like, okay, there's Beckett going, make a film about this one.
Smart ass.
And, yeah. But we actually did, and it was, as all worlds that we drop into, a fascinating adventure.
Yeah, and I'm keen. We talk a lot about this, and actually, there's a fantastic documentary here this year by Kirsten Johnson called Camera Person, and it asks us to reflect on the effect of being filmed, but also that there is someone behind the camera, and what is that relationship? And it's interesting because I was talking to the legendary cinematographer Joan Churchill, and she talked about a dinner that you'd all been at with, you mentioned Al Maisels, who we lost this year, also Haskell Wexler, just a fantastic man. And she very kindly has allowed us to show just a little clip from that dinner where you are having a conversation about reality and whether the presence of the camera changes things. So let's just have a look at clip number 3.
I remember the moment, but I don't think I've seen the film.
I think, Joan and I both shot it. I remember.
Oh, you've seen the film. Okay. Oh, you shot it too. All right.
What I'm hoping to do is to recreate for other people what it is I'm discovering as I'm going through whatever it is I'm following.
Primitive people, a lot of people say that don't take my picture, you're stealing.
Right, you're stealing my
soul. You're stealing. In a sense,
that's right.
When you're taking pictures, and when you're taking pictures, it gives you a control. Doesn't mean that you say, I'm going to control that guy and so forth, but there is a feeling of of control. You can say, well, I only shoot what I'm interested in, but you're interested in things which, in a sense, you're taking. You're taking. I want to eventually control because I want to.
But can you speak a bit more to this? When you're in a situation, when you're in a room filming, who are you, and are you changing reality? What are you doing there?
I'm not sure I know. I do know, among other things, that Haskell just died, which is sad for me because he was a very good friend. And he had once borrowed a camera from me so we could do the bus ride to the Martin Luther King thing in Washington. And he also borrowed Nell Cox, who was one of our sound people. And he always complained that when he changed the film, and this is, you've got to understand, the thing about this camera was, it not only was portable, but it was synchronous. So you could film dialogue. And that's what, of course, all filmmakers and playwrights have to have. They can't tell everybody what's going on. They have to let the film tell it. But he would complain that when he went to change the film, sand came out of the camera because I'd been using it to film my children on the beach. And he thought, that's not very professional.
But he, in that conversation, he says, this is the clip I thought we were going to see actually, he says, this conversation would be different if the camera wasn't here.
Right, yeah.
Because the cameras are there, he's being slightly more energetic, slightly more forceful, because he doesn't want to be seen as an old effing cameraman, is what he says. And so reality has been changed. So is it that you're trying to capture reality while not trying to change it? There's another director who directed Sunita talked about how can she be the fly on the wall when she's also the elephant in the room? Yeah.
I think, I mean, for us, you know, and it's changed as technology changes a bit, but, you know, if you get people who are really involved in what they're doing, after a while, they really just can't bother keep paying attention to you, especially if you're there all day. And, you know, that's the situation we are in. And we've always tried to do things maybe a little different than other filmmakers in the way that we've filmed as very small crew. I mean, we don't have a director because we're the directors, so we're, you know, the sound and the picture, or sometimes two cameras, depending on what the situation is. And I know Penny a lot of times has said that he'll sit back in the beginning and kind of use the zoom lens and kind of be out of the way and try not to be in the middle of it right in the beginning. So it's not so much about you as what they're doing, and it kind of more establishes that type of thing. But also, and people don't think about this a lot, but the sound is a very integral part, and a lot of times they are a lot closer, especially in the past before we had such beautiful radio mics. You know, they had to be right on top of people. And, you know, that was kind of an interesting relationship also, to be there but not be there. And in some ways, they had to be more fly on the wall, I think, than the camera.
Yeah.
I think you've often talked about your role is almost like a cat. When you're shooting, you feel like a cat in the room. Can you just say a little more about that?
Well, this was, what's his name's film about space, what was it called? The film, it was a film about a spaceship out in space, and this creature is somehow brought. I'm sure you've all seen it.
Oh, you mean Alien?
Alien, right. And there's a wonderful scene where the guy goes out to get his cat, because the cat is somehow in the spaceship. And the cat is watching him, and behind him, this huge creature opening his jaws and about to have lunch. And the cat just watches. And that's kind of a role we have.
So you're not, as the cat, you're not judging or controlling or thinking. You're just...
Well, you're thinking because you can't stop thinking, and you're wondering sometimes why you're there, you know. What is this about? But the thing is, you have in your hands this incredible machine that hasn't been with us for long, and when you pointed at something, it can't lie. And that, everybody kind of knows that. So they think this is going to be the real thing that happens here. And that was happened with Kennedy, with junkies in Synanon. It happens with almost all people, is they have the feeling that whoever this guy is, and we don't know much about him, but he's getting the real story, and we want people to know what the real story is. And that's kind of, and with it is, of course, a sound recorder, a Nagra, which Kadelsky fixed for us so it would be in sync with our cameras. That means that not only is the picture what's happening, what's being said is really what happened. And I think that, you know, people who are good at something or know that they know how to do something and effectively well, want people to know that. They want to share that. Like Kennedy used to tell me that, and he never saw us as the 6 o'clock news. He saw us as history.
And this is President Kennedy.
Excuse me, President Kennedy. But he saw it as history because he thought, this is a history that normally doesn't get told. And he wished that somebody had made a movie like we were making of Roosevelt when he had to declare war on Japan. And I thought, you know, of course, he would let us film anything. He never told us to turn off because he knew we weren't news cameras, we were history cameras. And I think that you rely on that for people to kind of trust you to not change anything or fuck around with it, really. So it was important.
I think, you know, you talk about politics, and it's a great link into our next clip, which, just to give you warning, I'm going to go straight to the war room. But this film, The War Room, brings together lots of things. It brings together performance, the notion of performance. It brings together your partnership, brings together the politics, which you'd started off with your early films, Primary and Crisis. It's interesting because earlier at the dinner with Haskell, Joan quotes someone who'd said, cinema verite is wanting what you get rather than getting what you want. And we'll watch this clip, but before we do, let's just talk about The War Room, because this is a film that covered the presidential campaign of '92. And you went into this thinking that you were, well, what did you go into it thinking? What was the film that you thought you were going to be making together?
Oh, boy.
Well, I mean, ever since Penny filmed Kennedy in the White House, and he filmed one of the very first cinema verite films, which was called Primary, which is about Kennedy and Humphrey's primary in Wisconsin. We always thought, wouldn't it be great to make a film about a man becoming president? And he actually had hoped to do that with Bobby Kennedy, but sadly that didn't happen. And through the years, we tried to do one with Dukakis and different people, but the problem for documentary filmmakers, as always, is fundraising, and so we couldn't get any funds. So after Dukakis, we came to the next election with Clinton, and several people came to us asking us if we wanted to make a film about the election, and we said the two things that we needed were money and access. And most of them didn't come back again. And then R.J. Cutler and Wendy Ettinger came by, and both of them at the time were working in theater, Broadway theater. But they loved politics, and they had seen some of the early films, and wanted to know if we wanted to do the film. So we, said the same mantra of, if we have a little money and access, come back. So they went out the door, and then, they came back and said, they struck out on all the other campaigns except for the Clinton campaign. And they talked to the communications director there, George Stephanopoulos, and he said, sorry, Clinton had a photographer following him around and a guy from Newsweek. So, you can't follow them around, but if you want, you can follow around the campaign staff. Well, following around the campaign staff is kind of like the booby prize, because, if Clinton loses, you have a film, not very saleable film, about the campaign staff of the losing president. And so, you know, we were like, oh, okay. And then we thought, well, we'll just go and get our foot in the door and see if Clinton will, you know, he'll love us and he'll let us into the campaign, which he did a little bit, but not that much. So, you know, we looked around all the different FOB, Friends of Bill, that were working for him, and, you know, tried out a few of them, and, you know, they weren't that exciting, although they were very, you know, influential people. And then we stumbled across James Carville, and, you know, he seemed like somebody's drunken uncle at the party, but he was absolutely fascinating, and supposedly he was like head of strategy. So we thought, well, you know, definitely let's do this guy. And, you know, so we asked James, and, you know, he decided to let us in. But, you know, in a lot of ways, we still couldn't film with a lot of these other people. They didn't want us around them, but James did, and he controlled this strange place, especially once we got to Arkansas, called the War Room. And so we named the film The War Room, so nobody could say, well, you weren't over there doing this. They couldn't really blame us.
So when we were talking before, I asked you, Chris, what your favorite moment of all the films that you've done, like one of your favorite moments, and the thing we're about to see is one of your favorite moments. And do you want to just set up this clip for us?
You know, I don't remember exactly which favorite moment. Is it the last meeting? Or
this is the last meeting. It's the day before the results come out. Okay. And we'll see James Carville, and I think we'll see a little of George Stephanopoulos as they address the people who've been working for them so hard. And we've been on a journey with them during this film. So let's just have a look at this clip. This is clip number 6.
And finally, before I give him the floor for, I hope it isn't the last time, I think we all know that besides Bill Clinton, one person really gave his campaign focus. And one person wrote what I call a haiku about 5 months ago. Change versus more of the same. The economy's stupid. I think if you did a nexus, it would come up in about 1,000 places. And don't forget healthcare. You know, I was kidding James yesterday. I said he's about to pass from the role of regular human being into the role of a legend. And I think he really deserves it. Because probably for the first time in a generation tomorrow, we're going to win. And that means that more people are going to have better jobs. People are going to pay a little less for health care, get better care, and more kids are going to go to better schools. So thanks.
There's a simple doctrine. Outside of a person's love, the most sacred thing that they can give is their labor. And somehow or another along the way, we tend to forget that. And labor is a very precious thing that you have. Labor with love. You've made a merger. And I think we're going to win tomorrow. And I think that the governor is going to fulfill his promise and change America. And I think many of you are going to go on and help him. I'm a political professional. That's what I do for a living. I'm proud of it. We changed the way campaigns are run. Used to be, there was a hierarchy. If you were on one floor, you didn't go to another floor. If you were somewhere on the organizational chart, there was no room for you there. Everybody was compartmentalized. And you people showed that you could be trusted. Everybody in this room, everybody. And people are going to tell you you're lucky. You're not. Ben Hogan said golf is a game of luck. The more I practice, the luckier I get. The harder you work, the luckier you are. I was 33 years old before I ever went to Washington, New York. I was 42 before I ever won my first campaign. And I'm happy for all of y'all. You've been part of something special in my life. Now, never forget what y'all have done. Thank you.
Such credit. I've got all kinds of things to say, but tell me what you see in that moment. What does that moment represent for you?
Well, I don't know if it's exactly that moment, but what this film represented for Penny, I think, is that, you go on these adventures with people at very special moments in their lives, and to be with people who were electing the President of the United States was just an awesome moment. I mean, it just meant so much to them, and what it did is really bonded us. I mean, we're part of this little club of people that, were at camp that year, kind of thing. And, we've all remained friends because of it.
It also, for me, Penny, some of the things that you've talked about previously about almost from Robert Drew talking about how he wanted documentary to be theatre without actors and plays without playwrights. And you've spoken very eloquently about, wanting to be kind of Ibsen,
Yes.
because you're so literary and wonderful.
Ibsen. I love Ibsen.
But the drama in that and the kind of denouement of that moment and the power of it, it would be hard to beat that in fiction, wouldn't it? There is nothing like that. It feels so real.
No, you're right. No, this is the reward for watchers. Watchers are a hard thing to be. And I know that because that's what I really am. And I get inside of a camera and I feel like the things that they lower down into the ocean for 2 miles and you have a little hole and you only see fishes. That's what I in the camera, that's what I am. I can only see what's through that little hole. And I have to be loyal to whatever that picture is, whatever. I mean, that's all I have. And what was really important to me was that James considered us part of his family. We were as important to him as anybody else in the room. And you think, he hasn't even seen the film yet. He doesn't even know we could be scoundrels. We could be selling it to him. So who knows? And he has figured out who we are the way we figured out who he is, which is what you see is what you're going to get.
I think also, what we are as watchers, but we're storytellers, and we're storytellers of what we witnessed. I mean, there's a lot of other stories about the Clinton campaign presidency, but this is the one that we witnessed. Right. And, our role making these type of films is to give you the sense that you're there, give you the sense that you know these people and understand a little bit more about them in a more intimate way than you would in any other article or news report.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left, so I want to turn to our last clip, which is going to be a clip from Kings of Pastry. There are a couple of things that you've said. Penny, I'll start with you. This is about the difference between shooting and editing. You said the difference between shooting and editing is like the difference between fucking and getting pregnant and bringing up children.
That's right.
That was very well put. There's a slightly more polite way that you put it later, which is appropriate to this, which is you're a hunter when you shoot and a chef when you edit. So there's a food theme running through lots of your lives, actually, and lots of your work. But with Kings of Pastry, first of all, just tell us how that film came about. You'd also said you always make the same film. Tell us about Kings of Pastry and how that fits into the work that you do.
It's the same as almost all of our films, including Don't Look Back, where somebody came to us and, had an idea and thought we would be, good to do something on the subject. And in this circumstance, it was a friend of mine who moved to Chicago and decided to go to the French pastry school and heard about this, it's literally the Olympics of pastry and cooking. And it's actually an award that goes back to the turn of the last century, where the government wanted to keep the level of craftsmanship in France up to the high level that it was known for. And it created this award called the Meilleur Ouvrier de France. And the most difficult competition in it, for some reason, even though they do all sorts of different types of crafts as well as different types of cooking and whatever, was the pastry competition. It was a 3-day competition where these chefs make everything from tiny little chocolates to these huge sugar sculptures. And, they sell their homes. It's the most important thing in their life, truly. I mean, they go into debt for like $100,000 to enter this competition. And the whole thing just sounded very wild and intriguing to me. So we decided to go on this journey with this French chef who started this school in America.
And in a way, that sense of you're always, in some sense, making the same film. It's someone who, the stakes are incredibly high for that person. You are embarking on this journey without having any idea of what's going to happen. And the drama is the same for this protagonist as it is for us, for Carville, and for you, and for Stephanopoulos. There's something. So let's just have a look at this clip. I think it's clear what is happening in it. So let's have a look at clip number 7.
Vous rajoutez une demi-heure. OK ?
I want you to know, Chris shot this.
Just hold the...
Chris shot this, and it's one of my favorite. It isn't just the collapse and that kind of drama. She went down and looked at the floor, which is where it all ends. And there's something, I don't know, that's like, I don't know, that's pure talent for me as a photographer.
It's also, I love that moment too, because it's pure humanity. That's when the camera isn't just a recording device. You are behind that camera, and you look where we would want to. It's almost a look of disbelief from the camera. It's like, oh my God.
I know.
It's extraordinary. You could presumably so easily have missed that moment.
Yeah, no, I almost missed it because the chef in front of him had one of those tall hats on, and like you can see he kind of goes down and up, and so I thought I got it, but I wasn't really sure I got it, and we were shooting tape at this point. So I remember after this competition, the stressful part ended, I went to the ladies' room and I rolled the tape back and looked to see if I actually got that, sugar sculpture falling.
Did you do it? Yes.
Well, it's that one of those really bittersweet moments because you do yes, but then, I felt really bad for Philippe. I mean, he was, somebody that we had filmed with a bit, and, you just feel pretty awful about, what just happened for him. And actually, some of the chefs were very worried about him, but they, you don't see this other part afterwards where all the chefs are all crying there with him and encouraging him to, go ahead and kind of rebuild something so he can get back into the competition. And one of the chefs told me I had to stop filming. And that's always a dilemma, too, as a camera person, because, that's kind of my job, is that I'm making this movie and filming it. So I did stop for a couple minutes, but then started up again. But the film has lots of twists and turns, which kind of speak to, in the end, sometimes, things happen bad for your characters, and sometimes just life has a way of making things work out. And certainly in this film, between the characters, things really worked out.
I know. He not only, Philippe got to win, but Jackie, who was our hero from Chicago, got the girl and married her.
But he lost the competition.
Lost the competition, right?
We're going to open up to questions in a minute, so have a think about what you'd like to ask these two legends. I just wanted to talk about food really quickly, because there seems to be a connection between...
You can tell we like to eat.
Well, okay, so the other thing that Joan Churchill did was to very kindly send me your recipe for Pennebaker paella.
Oh.
Do you say paella or paella?
This was a big family operation there.
Yeah. Okay, so I just love it as a recipe. I can't cook, but I might even have a go at this one, just because of the way that you wrote it.
We'll invite you the next time we do it.
Deal. I was hoping for that. Okay, so the first line says, this is paella for 16 normal people or 8 Pennebakers. And you have lines in it like, add broth along with mussels and clams strewn about recklessly. With chaotic charm, strew the emerging paella with artichokes. Stomp around with a big spoon or end of a broomstick. Don't stir, just stomp at it. And then the last line is, pitchers of sangria at hand with ice and a soft mat for personal use. That's the kind of dinner party I want to go to. But it's Laura Poitras was a chef as well, and you have chefs in your family.
Yeah, I did, and that was one of the things about making this Kings of Pastry film, is that my grandmother had 2 very high-end pastry shops in New York, and then, so I had that in my background, but really what was in my background is my other grandmother, who was Hungarian, was just the most amazing chef. I mean, she was a true genius and kind of known in her community. So every year on my birthday, and this is like the 1950s when everybody's getting cake box mix cakes, I would get a 16-layer Dobish tort cake with mocha cream icing and this like burnt, burnt sugar topping on top of it, and it would be tied up in this brown paper package and sent to me. I mean, she lived in Pennsylvania and we lived in Brooklyn, but so I grew up with all this amazing cooking. So making this film seemed very natural to me.
I think it's also it's a great source of metaphor. And Penny, you are so amazing at the metaphors. I know there's going to be a food one coming out before too long. Okay, so let's open up the floor, and I think we've got roving mics. So yes, the gentleman at the at the back. Can we get a microphone over there?
By the way, if you wanted to know what my favorite scene was,
Yeah.
when she walked into the office.
Oh,
I'm romantic too, besides a chef.
I said I must never let her leave.
And you didn't.
They didn't. That was 40 years ago.
We do get divorced on every editing.
You don't have to tell them about that.
Yes,
manage.
My name is Jason Baumgartner, also a documentary filmmaker. I'm kind of curious, what have you guys done to make the subjects that you're filming comfortable with you before you start rolling cameras?
What do you do to make people comfortable before you start rolling the camera?
Feed them? I don't know. That's their problem. We just have this peculiar equipment that we've sort of built ourselves so it doesn't look very professional. And that's not always a good thing. But, they kind of know what they're there for, and they sure know what we're there for. So, conditioning is not necessary. It's serious.
I think, because most of the films we make are about people who we like and admire, or we think we like and admire, I think that makes it easier because they feel like,
we're their friends.
They're friends, that we have the same interest in this journey. It becomes complicated sometimes because, sometimes people don't turn out exactly as you imagine. I remember when we did the film on John DeLorean. We liked John DeLorean and admired what he was trying to do, build his own car company and everything. But in some ways, I kind of think of him as kind of a Disney villain or something. There are aspects of him that, we didn't go along with, but, which complicates when you're making a film. But I think in the beginning, it, is easier for us because we don't have that adversarial role that some people do.
Great. Let's get a couple more. I'm getting the rap sign, so we're going to go speedy through. Yes, lady in the front row. Just wait for the microphone.
Hello. So I'm fascinated with counterculture, even though I was born in '92. And now I'm being fortunate enough to be doing a biodoc on somebody that lived through those years. And every time I follow him around with the camera, something amazing happens. Every time I go through his extensive archive, I find amazing things. So I guess the question is, how do you pick and choose? How do you, to be politically correct, go from the hunting to the chef's table?
For both of you. Yeah.
I want to hear what you say.
It sounds like you have a couple different things going on there because you have like a lot of archive that you want to add to the film, and then you have a contemporary story that you're following in some ways. I don't know. Part of that question is, for us when we're shooting a real life thing is like, when are you done with shooting your story? And it's hard. The film that we have here at the festival is a legal story, and I could change it today. Because things just keep happening. So that's a problem. But, there's also that element, both with the editing and with the filming, especially with the editing, is that you get bored. You feel like you're ready to kind of stop this, whatever you're doing, and tidy it up and make it into a film. But, it's a challenge. There's a storytelling challenge on both aspects, and the shooting challenge, and then again in the editing room. And it's bringing out your characters and making them tell the story that you feel like you want to tell, and the story that you have gotten too. Sometimes you want to tell something else, but that's not the story that's there.
Great. Yeah. Another question. Yes, lady. Yes, you.
What I imagine that as you become documentarists and you came to where you are right now, you made a lot of mistakes. Is there any mistakes in particular you can think of that you would advise young documentarians that are starting out to avoid?
What mistakes would you tell young documentarians to avoid?
Well, I think the main thing I think a person should feel is if they were setting out to be a jockey or a gambler. They should have a sense of themselves as having luck with them when they needed it. And if you have that, of course you can do anything. You can climb mountains. But I think filmmaking needs a kind of luck because everything's so chancy. People just fall in front of you that you didn't send for, and they turn out to be an essential part of what you're doing. You can't thank anybody seriously about it, but the fact is that you have to assume that that's going to happen, whatever you do with that camera and that sound. I don't know, because it's changing enormously. I think that this kind of filmmaking was seen originally as a kind of minor offshoot of what was being done in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. So people went into it, hopefully, to get into the competition with Hollywood films, which of course was ridiculous because the theaters had no use for you, so you were outside begging and not getting much back. But I think now what's happened is that you don't have to make a camera for yourself like we did. You can go and get a phone. And the phones are fantastic, and you could make a film with a phone. You can do all kinds of things with it, so that I think the whole world is now in a position to decide whether they want to write a novel, create an opera, or maybe make a film, a documentary film. And that's kind of fantastic, because that's never happened before.
And that's a perfect place. I'm so sorry, we have to wrap it up, but that's a perfect place for it. So to everybody, thank you for coming. Bonne chance.
Thank you all.
And tea.